Good evening, everyone. Happy Easter. Before we kind of get into things, I really want us to walk out of here with just a few words. You'll remember a number of other things, like all the different, how we kind of progressed through the Old Testament readings, or how we heard the gospel when the two ran to the tomb and they found it empty. But more than anything, I want you to remember these words. And so that's why we're going to do some calisthenics tonight, okay? So this group over here, when I point to you, I want you to stand up and say resurrection. All right? Let's try it. 1, 2, 3. Resurrection. Okay, that was like maybe it's 9 o'clock at night. Very good. All right. So this group over here, so resurrection confirmed. Confirmed, all right? But not controlled like that. I want you to stand up and say, confirmed. All right, ready? 1, 2, 3. Confirmed. I think this group, although smaller in number, was louder than resurrection. All right, let's try it again. Resurrection. All right, wonderful. So resurrection confirmed, and then this whole group over here, including the deacon and the seminarian, all right, eternal life. Okay? Eternal life. 1, 2, 3. Oh, so much robust there too. All right, let's put it all together and beautiful. All right, now we're awake. All right, wonderful. The resurrection confirmed eternal life. It's really interesting because I think for the most of us, we live in this culture where we take it for granted that there is something after death. And there was a time in the world where really the philosophers were the only ones that were arguing that there's something immaterial about us that's not just of our, it's not that we're more than the sum of our physical parts, that there's a soul and that soul is eternal. The philosophers, they reason to the fact that there is a God, that God is intelligent, that God is powerful, and that they're not God. Okay, those are the 4 things that you can know about God by reason alone. So you don't need faith to believe in God. You just need a clear functioning intellect, a lack of emotional impediment, and a lot of time on your hands. And you will reason to the fact that God exists, God is powerful, God is intelligent, and you're not God. But they also reason to the fact that the soul is eternal. What they couldn't find out, though, is, what happens. The resurrection confirms eternal life. And what is that eternal life? Union with God. And so that understanding transforms everything. That we come to understand that what we do in this life is going to echo in eternity. And in fact, the whole point of this life is that we could prepare ourselves to experience the deep communion of what God has for us. He has pursued us with a personal, passionate, unrelenting love. That God created us for Himself, and He wants us to know the love that He has. What motivates us, though? Is it just merely the fact that we know that there is eternal life? I think that can stir us. It could make us think about, really, what do I want to do with my life? How do I want to behave? But ultimately, it's love itself that motivates. C.S. Lewis said this about Christianity. He said that Christianity has the only true definition or concept of grace. All other religions, You have to do something in order to be accepted by God. Again, in all other religions, you have to do something in order to be accepted by God. Only Christianity accepts us just the way we are and says, I love you with whatever struggle that you might be going through, whatever difficulty is in your life, whatever challenge that you have. I love you right where you are, and I lay down my life for you. And that's what he did. For even while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. It's that love. Well, he pursues us with a personal, passionate, unrelenting love. John Powell was a priest, primarily lived in Chicago. He was a Jesuit, and he wrote many books. One of the books that he wrote, he ended with this story about Tommy. Now, I know that on the internet they have all kinds of stories, and half of them are made up or whatever. This was a fact check, and they went to Father Powell years ago before he died. He's since passed away. May he rest in peace. And he did confirm that this was not just a made-up story, and it wasn't embellished. It was as it is. You can find the full story if you just Google Father John Powell and Tommy's story. He describes Tommy as coming into his classroom, hair maybe about 6 inches down over his shoulders. This was in 1963, and he said it was the first young man that he saw with long hair. He said, well, I won't judge, what's on top of the head. It's more on what's inside. But still, there was something strange about Tommy. He was the resident atheist in the theology of faith class. And it wasn't so much that he was engaged in, strong discussions and were really trying to look at things in a sound and thoughtful way. You can have good arguments in that regard. His was more of, and rolling of the eyes and constant objecting and those types of things. By the time the semester got to the end, Father Powell was happy that he was seeing, no more of Tommy. So Tommy comes up and he gives him his final exam, and he goes, well, Father, you ever think I'll find God? Right away, Father Powell says, no. No, I don't. And he said, oh, well, I thought that was the product you were pushing. And he takes a few steps, and he goes to walk out the door, and he says, Tommy, I don't think that you'll ever find God, but I'm absolutely sure that he will find you. And he just said, oh, and he left. Well, a couple years later, news travels in small communities. Sounds like Tommy graduated. Whew. Oh, that's great. Good for Tommy. And off he goes into the world. A couple more years later, kind of comes back through the community. Father John finds out that Tommy is sick. And he actually went out and found Father Powell. So he walked into his office. He's, Tommy. It's like, Father John. He goes, Tom, I've heard that you're sick. Can you talk about it? And he said, yeah, I can talk about it. I have cancer, and I'm gonna be struggling. And he says, Tommy, how does it feel to be 24 and to have cancer? And he said, well, it could be worse. And he said, well, what do you mean? We said, well, I could be 30, 40, 50, 60 years old and still think that fulfillment in life comes from achieving power and prestige or enjoying pleasures, gaining financial security. Anyways, I didn't come here for that, Father. I wanted to come and tell you that I remembered what you said that day as I left the class. And I never really thought about it until the doctors told me that the lump was malignant. And I have to say, when that happened, I started to storm heaven. And I pounded on that door, pounded on it. Have you ever given yourself to something with such effort and with such commitment for a long time and nothing happens? You get glutted, and sometimes you quit, and I did. But there's something else that you said that I remembered, even as I was trying to find God and not finding Him. I heard in my mind, you say that the saddest thing in life is to go through life without loving. And the second saddest thing is to love someone and not to tell them. So I started with the most difficult one, my dad. And I walked in, and he was reading the paper, and I said, Dad, I need to talk to you. The paper remained, go ahead and talk. It's serious, Dad. And the paper went down about 3 inches. And he looked at me, and I said, Dad, I love you, and I wanted you to know that. Well, 2 things happened that I never had seen before. He dropped the paper, and he started to cry. And then he got up, and he did the second thing. He hugged me. And those were great. But the best thing was that we stayed up all night. All night. He had work the next day. He stayed up all night, and we talked about everything. Father, that was one of the best nights of my life. Then I told my mom, I told my little brother. Those were a little bit easier, but I came to be doing this. And then finally, one day it just happened. I turned the corner, and there he was. God showed up. He found me. It almost occurred to me that I was kind of like an animal trainer saying, hey, God, get down here right now. Jump through this hoop. And I just realized that when I opened myself to Him, that He would find me. Father Powell was just taken back. He said, Tommy, these are unbelievable insights. You got to tell this to my class now, my faith and theology class. And he said, well, I don't know, Father. I was ready to tell you, but let me think about it. He said, okay, well, give me a call. Well, a little while later, I called him. He said, Father, I want to do it. I want to tell them. I want to tell the class. A little while later, then he got another call, and he said, Father, I'm not going to be able to keep my commitment. He said, that's okay, Tommy. He said, but I want you to tell them, Father. Would you tell them for me? And indeed, Father Powell did. And here, 50 years later, we're still telling Tommy's story. It's one I think that many of us can relate to wherever we are in our life. God has shown us this template of an openness to Him. He accepts us wherever we are and wants us to bring us to a deeper understanding of His personal, passionate, unrelenting love, all the while understanding that eternal life is waiting for us. We've got to open ourselves to the Lord, and He will find us. We'll be filled with His love, and being filled with His love, from inside we'll be motivated to enter into our own passions and to be able to die to ourselves and to experience those resurrections in this life and to experience in them ultimately in the next. Happy Easter, everyone.